What's happening? This is 9/11, and you are tuned into AVG Podcast. And today, you know how we do it. Let's get to it. Today, I have a very special guest, man. Ex-military vet, retired of over 30 years of leadership at Procter & Gamble, served on the city council in Alexandria, Louisiana, worked for the city of Alexandria in the incubator program, and the head director over the housing authority. So as you can see, this man wears a lot of hats. And I want you to confirm something for me. I think I got confirmation you were the Grand Marshal of the 2025 MLK.
I was.
Congratulations on that. Congratulations on that. So as you can see, you wear a lot of hats. So first question is, where do you find time to rest? How you juggle all that?
Well, I don't know. Nobody told me I couldn't do it, so I just do it.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer. And like I say, you have served on the city council of Alexandria, Louisiana. So you have dealt in politics all your life pretty much. So how do you feel about just the state of politics right now, what you see going on in America and the landscape of politics?
Well, of course, I am disappointed in what happened on the national level.
Yes, sir.
I guess I'm mostly disappointed with the idea of young people not seeing the need to go vote.
Man.
And I've been saying this for the last 50 years that all elections have consequences.
Mm.
And when those consequences are impacting our daily lives, we don't participate in the political process. We don't really have a reason to complain because your only voice at the end of the day is your voice.
Yes, sir.
So it is important that even if you don't like what's going on, rather than just talking about the problem, if you vote, you can be part of the fix to the problem.
You are absolutely right. And like I say, a lot of your service was done in the city level. So just if you could real quick touch on people how much they need, because a lot of people, I always say, I had Dr. Ife Williams on here, and we talked about how people, what I call, vote for the Super Bowl of politics when you go voting for the president, but they take care of their city officials, and that plays a major part of your day-to-day life.
Well, everybody gets excited about the presidential election and congressional delegation, and they forget about the local races. But the local politics is what's closest to the people. They're the ones who impact your lives more than the national politics. They're the ones who take care of your infrastructure, potholes, being sure you have safe, clean drinking water, being sure your light's going to stay on, you have safe streets to travel on. All of that's done at the local level.
Yeah.
Well, they may receive federal funds for those programs, but the execution of those projects is done at the local level. Tip O'Neill was a blue dog Democrat from Boston, Massachusetts. And he would say all the time, all politics is local. And that's true because they're the ones who's closest to the people. And they're the ones who has the greatest impact on your lives, on your daily lives.
Gotcha.
And when you have an issue with your sanitation or an issue with your streets, you don't call the president, you call the city officials.
You look, and I said that on the interview with Dr. Ife. I said, like, if you got to think about it like in the same premise as you go about your job. If you get into something at the job, you're not going to speak to the owner of the company. You're going to speak to your directors, your first line supervisors. That's kind of what you got to look at your city officials as. Those are the people that directly impact.
Exactly.
So you spot on with that. So that's a good analogy.
So pay attention to the local politics. Those are the ones who impact your life the most.
Gotcha. And now that we got that out the way, I just wanted to, so somebody that was seasoned in politics, to just put some perspective on what's going on right now. But the reason we are here, we are coming up to Black History Month. And when I first heard this story, I was taken back because of how close I've been connected with the family, and I didn't really know all the ins and outs. And so today, I wanted to bring you in of direct lineage, and for the audience, just to let you know, we're talking about the great inventor Chales Page. So how did that story come about, and what do you remember about that story to let the audience know this was the first patent aircraft even that preceded the Wright brothers. And when I heard this story, I was taken back because it was right there in Pineville, Louisiana. So can you shed some light and kind of tell me, just educate us on how this story actually developed and what's behind the scenes with that?
Okay, Chales Page was my grandfather.
Okay.
He died 1 year before I was born,
Okay.
but through family history and stories told by my parents and my uncles and aunts, he did in fact develop what he called the airship and had it patent. Back in the early 1900s, it took about 2 or 3 years to get a patent once you make application for it.
Mm-hmm.
So he applied for a patent for his airship that he had created and invented in 1903. But he didn't get that patent until April of 1906. For comparison, the Wright brothers got the patent, what they call for their flying machine,
Mm-hmm.
in May 1906, a month later than my grandfather's. Now, the story about my grandfather's airship, that he built this flying machine,
Mm-hmm.
aircraft, in his barn behind his house. And he shipped it by train to St. Louis World's Fair for display and participate in a contest.
Mm-hmm.
But the aircraft never arrived in St. Louis. It was
Yes.
never returned to him. It
Mm-hmm.
was never found. So there's always been speculation in the family that it was either destroyed
Mm-hmm.
intentionally or
Mm-hmm.
stolen. We really don't know what happened to it. But he was smart enough to have it patented and recorded in the United States government. And I have a copy of that patent here at my home. And with that patent, it shows a detailed description on how the airship was constructed,
Mm-hmm.
how you fly it, and what are all the mechanical parts of it and how it's supposed to work.
And when I was doing my research on that, I saw that he used, it was a two balloon system. And at the time, I think they called the process lighter than air. The technology he was using was called lighter than air because he was using the
Correct.
two balloon system. And like you say, the bottom component was built like a sailboat, so to speak, where it had all the components. But they said technologically, he was ahead of the curve of how you can manipulate landing and taking off, which nobody else had mastered at that time.
Well, it is the lighter than air concept.
Mm-hmm.
The Wright brothers' invention with the flying machine was heavier than air concept.
Exactly.
With my grandfather's invention, the two balloon concept is
Mm-hmm.
very similar to the hot air balloon or the
Okay.
blimp that you see today. That's the technology they use, is lighter than air. With the idea of pumping hot air into balloons, which is a part of my grandfather's invention and the
Mm-hmm.
description in his patent, pumping hot air inside the balloons raises the aircraft, and you can guide it with the rudders and stuff you had on that sailboat.
Mm,
Letting hot air out causes it to descend.
man, okay. Now, see, that's what I was reading on how they was, because they were saying like that was the problem pretty much across the country with everybody that was, racing to try to get some type of aircraft in the air. They couldn't really manipulate the landing like the D sail and the A sail, so they couldn't get that figured out. And he was ahead of the curve with that. And so, being that something like that, like you said, went through the process, and I know it was the early 90s. But how was something that impactful, something that advanced from our community almost wrote out of the books and hasn't been made highlighted more, so to speak? I'll just say that.
Well, you got to take in consideration what life was like in this country in the early 1900s for
Mm-hmm.
African Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that some folks are saying, okay, you all put everything on racism, but truth matters.
It matters.
If it were not for the fact that he was an African American, I believe, as well as all the other folks who've done their research, believe that aircraft would have made it to St. Louis and would have been entered into the contest that he was planning to fly it in. We have no other explanation. And I
Yeah.
have not received any explanation from anybody else to refute what I just shared with you.
Mm-hmm.
Nor has there been any footnote in the history books about this invention.
That's what I was
You
getting
have to
at.
also realize who was writing the history books and who was controlling the narrative.
Yep.
If you think about that, if you read some of the history books, especially if you read some history books and pictorial publications about Central Louisiana,
Hmm.
it's almost like black people didn't exist, but we know we did.
Exactly.
So while we're not trying to create a blame game or take anything away from the Wright brothers,
Hmm.
what we're seeking is just recognition for what my grandfather accomplished. It's not taking away anything from the Wright brothers. It was a totally different concept.
Hmm.
They call theirs a flying machine. He
Hmm.
called his the airship. Lighter than air, heavier than air. Two
Yeah.
different concepts. But he just so happened to get his patent for his invention a month before the Wright brothers got a patent for theirs.
Gotcha. And another thing I wanted to, like you said, if you look at some of the early historical records in Alexandria or Central Louisiana, and just to let y'all know, that's where we are from, Central Louisiana, and this did take place in Pineville. When I read the story and kind of got deeper into it, I'm wondering, even if not nationally, it was regarded. How was something like that not regarded even higher, just locally, between like the black community? How didn't we don't know enough about this story?
Well, it just got forgotten. It was not included as a part of the Louisiana history. But the reason it has a breath of life now, the story about
Mm-hmm.
what my grandfather did,
Mm-hmm.
because of a local historian by the name of Michael Wynn.
Michael Wynn.
Michael Wynn called me about 5 years ago after he had discovered the story about my grandfather. He had done
Mm-hmm.
his own research, and
Mm-hmm.
he was reaching out to anybody who was connected to Chales Page or knew the story. I still don't know how he got my contact information, but he called me.
Yeah.
And we had that conversation as, yes, I'm aware of the story.
Mm-hmm.
That's my grandfather. And he confirmed everything. He had gone to uh, talk to resources in Washington, D.C., St.
Mm-hmm.
Louis, all over the country. He did his research and he brought new life back into this story. Because when I was a kid growing up,
Mm-hmm.
we stopped talking about it because all the other kids would laugh at us and say, you know, the Wright brothers invented the first airplane. It
Yeah.
wasn't your grandfather. Well, I had no documents in my hand to prove it at the time.
Mm.
So I just stopped talking about it.
Yeah.
Rather than being humiliated by the other kids and made a
And that
lot
was with,
of
within our community.
exactly in Central Louisiana. So I've known the story my entire life.
Mm.
When Michael Wynn did his research on his own and then contacted me to confirm what he was finding is in fact the truth. And now
Man.
we can talk about this again with a renewed emphasis on what is happening and what did happen to my grandfather's airship. Now, the New Orleans airport last
Mm-hmm.
year had it on display for 3 months. The historical marker is up in Pineville near the old homestead.
Okay.
I've been in conversations with folks who's building a Black Inventors Hall of Fame museum in New Jersey. We're going to have a replica of the airship on display, and they plan to open that museum in 2027.
Man.
I received a call from a writer in Canada
Mm-hmm.
who wants to write a story about this. Last week,
Wow.
I had an email from a reporter in New Orleans who wants
Uh-huh.
to write a story about this. I'm sharing all of this to say this. Everybody is interested in doing something with this story
Mm-hmm.
except Alexandria.
Wow. Man, say that again.
I
Yeah.
can't get any traction in Alexandria to do anything at the Alexandria airport.
That's
We've had
crazy.
meetings, we've had several conversations with the folks who are in charge. They claim they have a historical marker. This in a warehouse somewhere. They've had it for 2 years. They can't decide where they want to put it up, when they want to put it up. They've talked extensively about painting a mural in the airport.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing has gone beyond conversation. Nothing
Wow.
has materialized.
Yeah.
Stuff is happening around the country about my grandfather, except Alexandria.
Except Alexander.
Well, let me remind you, if you're a Bible scholar, that Jesus was not popular in his hometown.
Man. Yes, indeed.
So I'm I'm hopeful that Alexandria will find its way
Mm-hmm.
and be willing to do something with my grandfather's invention if it's no more than just a recognition. And that really is all we're asking for is
That's it.
recognition for what he accomplished
Mm-hmm.
so he will be rightfully remembered in history as a teaching tool for kids who come along behind us.
Joe, do you understand the impact that could have had on young kids around Alexander? Like we didn't have like I know we know a couple of older guys in some of the older generation, Ralph Sampson, but until this wave of athletes, we didn't really have pro athletes. We didn't know about inventors. We didn't really. It was like we had a ceiling, so to speak, in the city. Do you know what just the imagination that would have unlocked for kids knowing something that of that magnitude happened right here in the same grounds that they're walking on?
Yeah, they would probably read that story and said, wow, if he can do that, maybe I can too.
Maybe I can too. And we were
So it's
deprived of
possible.
it.
So all it takes is just one spark, one idea, one opportunity
That's it.
for these young minds who see something out there,
Mm,
or they see somebody that looks like them that has
representation.
achieved something, and it's a seed that's planted in them and saying, if they can accomplish that, maybe I can too.
Yes, indeed.
Now, here's what's so amazing about my grandfather's story. He had to teach himself how to write and read. He was not an engineer. He had formal education training, but he did this on his own initiative in figuring out. I'm still amazed at how he was able to do that without any formal training or formal education. But he did it.
That was the first thing when I was doing my research on it, and when I looked up the aircraft and I saw and then as they were talking about the blueprint and they were going, through the story of how you say it was supposed to be delivered. When they got down and they said just what you said, he was self-taught reading and writing, and I'm like, so hold on, you came up, but that just shows you the resilience of our people and the innovative spirit that he had to come up with this on foreign land and just basically taught himself how to figure it out.
Right. Now,
Figure it out.
beyond him inventing the airship,
Mm-hmm.
in that same entrepreneurial spirit he had the idea of creating a business club for Black people
Mm.
who run their own business, how to set up their own business.
Okay.
He was a farmer and a timberman.
Okay.
So he was a good enough timberman where he was called upon to harvest the trees, support for bridges,
Mm-hmm.
utility poles for the phone company, the utility company. He provided the poles for them to do that. The utility poles you see now,
Yeah.
that's what he did.
Wow.
And that's in addition to being a farmer and raising a family of 13 children.
Wow.
And all of these ideas of running a business,
Mm-hmm.
creating a business organization to help Black folks go into business, how to establish a business. So he was way ahead of his time.
Way ahead of his time. And you talking about being ridiculed by by your era, saying that that couldn't have happened. Your grandfather didn't do that. Imagine in his era what how forward thinking he was and what he was presenting to the people. Like, look, we need to do this.
Right.
Man, so now I see where that spirit come from in you. You giving me a lot of stuff that when I researched it, I saw some of this, but you peeling it back another layer. And it's such a shame that our city, our hometown, isn't celebrating this story more. So hopefully with everything, because I've seen it come through some social media sites, and it was people I didn't even know, but I've seen them reference it. And I'm like, okay, you and I, we talked about doing this probably about maybe a year or 2 years ago. but we're just not getting to where we can sit down and do it. But I'm seeing it starting to pick up the traction now. And sometimes, like you say, you have to go abroad and bring the hometown back. We might have to come back to Alexandria.
Right. Nobody wants to get on a wagon when the wagon is empty.
Ooh,
When the wagon is full, everybody want to jump on the band
man, everybody want to run behind it.
and say, when you're successful, everybody want to be with you. But when you're struggling at the beginning, nobody want to be with you. So
And look,
hopefully, this will provide some momentum around the country, and Alexandria will find its way and decide what they want.
look, I'm gonna tell you this: if you decide, sign off rights and make a move, and tell them you got a nephew over here that I could play the lead role if I'm called upon. If you just need me, just let me know.
I'll certainly keep that in mind. Well,
Let me
I
know,
appreciate the opportunity to tell my grandfather's story. So thank you for providing the
man.
opportunity to tell the story.
I appreciate you taking the time because, like I say, read everything he's done and had his hand in. Very busy man. I know your time is super valuable. And we had a civil conversation. We didn't even bring up the Cowboys and the Saints. So we had a good civil conversation today.
Well, the Saints and the Cowboys are in the same position right now. We both in the couch bowl.
We going for the Couch Bowl. You're right. Anything you want to leave the listeners with before we get out of here?
Well, just keep telling the story wherever you can. And if you hear folks who want to hear the story, please get them in touch with me, and I'll be more than glad to share the story with them.
I definitely will. And as you sit here and you listen to this story, it pretty much epitomizes what my podcast stands for. So we always visualize our goals, and then we accomplish those visualized goals. Everything Mr. Chales Page stood for. So I appreciate you once again for coming on, and I thank you for your time.
You bet. Give my best to the family.
Yes, sir.
All right.